Welcome to Part 4 of Module 3 on Inclusive and Equitable Assessment. Please take a moment to read this quote by Falvey, Givner, and Kim. I felt it was appropriate to start with this quote for a couple of reasons. First, it affirms that all students who enroll in our classes have a right to be taught with the same care and attention, and therefore we have an obligation to help all students thrive. Second, it asks us to recognize that the benefits of inclusion are helpful to all. Doing work to give full access to, say, disabled students through closed captioning helps to ensure that students who speak English as a second language also have more access. We never know how inclusion may benefit others. A dynamic, communal, supportive culture in our courses can lead to greater diversity of thought, debate, activity, and collaboration, all elements known to improve student growth, whether it's intellectual, social, or emotional. What do we mean when we say inclusivity and equity in relation to assessment? Inclusive assessment practice means assessing student learning through a wide diversity of formats and in ways that are accessible to all students, regardless of cultural background, ability, or technology. Equitable assessment ensures that our assignments are fair insofar as every student has what they need to be successful, including resources, appropriate standards, academic support, and content. However, to know what we are striving for with inclusive and equitable assessments, we have to know some of the problems that can sometimes plague us. First, assignments are likely to be inequitable and exclusive if they contain bias, stereotype threats, or trauma. Assignments may entail biases that privilege some students over others, like those that, for example, ask a student to conduct a regression analysis on what leads to Super Bowl wins. This sort of question can subtly communicate that students who are not fans of American football are not centered in the course, potentially including greater numbers of women, international students, and others. Assignments are more likely to become problematic in these ways when we as instructors are not aware of various factors best described by Peabody's own Richard Milner in his work on opportunity gaps. In this research, Milner argues that opportunity, not merely achievement, gaps, are likely when the instructors fall victim to such assumptions as, say, colorblindness, myths of meritocracy, deficit mindsets, and low expectations for groups. All of these and other prejudicial types of beliefs have been known to negatively affect instructor treatment of students in K-12 and in higher ed, leading to biased assessments and diminished opportunities for marginalized groups. In addition, some assignments may activate stereotype threat. Stereotype threat is a term pioneered by psychologist Claude Steele in his research on experiences of people of color, women, and practically any marginalized group. He and his co-authors defined the term to mean the frequent feeling of threat one has when you fear others stereotyping a group to which you belong. Anyone can experience stereotype threat, but those on the margins can have greater apprehension about prejudice, discrimination, or other forms of mistreatment. For students, this can affect performance. For instance, if an instructor in an American history class seems to minimize or ignore the contributions of African American thought, stereotype threat among students of color may be activated, insofar as they fear their instructor may harbor negative stereotypes of African Americans. Steele argues that in assignments like tests or written projects, these students' cognitive load will increase as they are preoccupied with both completing the work and fears of bias or discrimination. This then can lead to distractions or less confidence, which in turn can create performance gaps. Worse, assignments can evoke trauma, that is, traumatic collective memories, which are likely to distract, if not harm students, raising emotional and affectational issues for students that can lead to distrust or a lack of belonging, not to mention diminished performance with higher cognitive load. Second, self-direction and self-efficacy are also factors that are critical to understand. They reference the ways that students feel empowered to participate in autonomous ways in course assignments. Because online courses rely heavily on student self-direction and self-efficacy, students who do not have high levels of either may be disadvantaged. This is what Zhu and Jaggers found in their research in 2014, most notably that there is a performance gap between online and face-to-face courses, particularly for students who fell into one or more of the following categories: younger, Black, male, and those with lower GPAs. This was also particularly true in the social sciences and professions. It is important to understand that self-direction and self-efficacy can be lacking for a variety of structural and social reasons that touch down in students' everyday experiences, diminishing their sense of belonging, confidence, or skill. That is, a lack of self-efficacy or self-direction is not simply because individuals do not have enough grit or will, but because they have experienced greater levels of exclusion, toxic forms of prejudice, or lingering traumas of discrimination. This is relevant here because our assessment strategies can compound these exclusions if they don't support students in their efforts to be self-actualized learners. Examples of assignments that don't help students build self-direction and self-efficacy might include those types of assignments that provide limited guidance or encouragement, assignments that are not scaffolded appropriately to build student skills or knowledge and create the autonomy they need, or when we limitedly or not at all support outreach to students who are struggling. A third problem is that of inaccessible assignments, those assignments that do not accommodate the full diversity of cultural backgrounds, technological capabilities, or disabilities existing among our students, among other issues. Examples might include assignment materials that online screen readers cannot access, assignment discussions in Zoom classrooms with no captions or transcript support, Zoom classes or long video lectures that cannot be streamed in countries, regions, or homes with limited internet access. For more on issues of accessibility, we urge you to read the work of Vanderbilt faculty Amy Hamrai in Medicine, Health, and Society, author of Building Access, and the blog Mapping Access, in which they discuss a variety of issues related to accessibility in online teaching. Fourth, students can be just as guilty as faculty in replicating exclusions or inequities in our broader society, or allowing biases and stereotypes to affect their collaborations. Therefore, collaborative group assignments can involve assessments that are open to a variety of challenges, some of which we've already discussed. Some examples might include students making microaggressions towards one another, students with greater self-confidence dominating those who have less, students marginalizing underrepresented students from group planning and work. Lastly, instructors can be biased in our evaluations and grading. Being human, we are subject to all manner of fallacies and judgment, and despite our efforts, these can weave their way into our classes, some in the form of grading bias. The literature on grading biases often refers to lower expectations or culturally rooted prejudices instructors hold against some group, but they may take a myriad of forms. Evaluative biases towards groups of students have no place in grading and can perpetuate performance gaps and, in turn, structural inequalities. How can online assessment be more inclusive and equitable? Here are 14 principles that may help, with some suggestions for practice along the way. One is to uncover and examine the biases that we hold, with humility, openness, and vigilance. Just when we think we are beyond bias, we are most likely to let our society's problematic prejudices speak through us. All of us, therefore, need to be vigilant and prioritize inclusion and equity in all aspects of assessment. Second, get to know your students and what helps them to thrive. For instance, in surveys, background knowledge probes, office hours, and when possible, autobiographical assignments. This will help you to support your students equitably and ensure greater trust and belonging that is necessary for learning. Third, we can design assessments with diverse perspectives and voices in mind. Consider, for instance, how diverse our authors are that you assign in your readings, the actors you depict in case studies, or the situations you reference by example in test questions. Fourth, we can adopt a growth mindset of intelligence, remembering to affirm our students' capacities for growth even as they make mistakes. This can be applied in any evaluative interaction you may have with students, but consider, for instance, using video-audio feedback on student assignments, ones that allow them to hear the supportive tone in your voice and ones that highlight their successes as well as challenges. Fifth, We can offer support to our students, especially those who struggle. Many students, especially those who have histories of being marginalized in higher education, believe they need to prove themselves and to others, and therefore they can work too hard on their own and not reach out to you or their peers. Therefore, if you see students struggling, reach out to them. Also, the support you give could be focused on their individual learning and self-regulation, but to fully support them, you might also work to expand institutional or curricular resources for entire groups of students so that they can find full inclusion. Sixth, it's important to provide transparent, frequent communication about assessments so that those with less self-efficacy and self-direction can receive all the guidance that they need. Seventh, it is important to scaffold assignments intentionally to support the gradual growth of skill, knowledge, and autonomy. For instance, instructors may ensure that final project skills are well developed by assigning smaller mid-semester assignments that assess those skills and provide substantive feedback to students so they can have a greater chance of success. 8. Help students find personal and cultural relevance in the assignments. Here it is important to consider what Gloria Ladson-Billings calls culturally relevant pedagogy. That is, teaching that is responsive both to the diverse ways of knowing that our students bring to class by virtue of their unique cultural backgrounds, as well as to their needs for empowerment and agency. Helping students find their own path through the material improves their sense of belonging, motivation, and performance. This may include assignments that give students autonomy to choose topics or formats that leverage their own experiences, while providing opportunities for peers to learn from one another's diverse approaches to course themes. 9. Ensure accessibility for all abilities and technological resources. This includes avoiding an over-reliance on one or two forms of assessment, especially synchronous or high-bandwidth assignments. The more we have synchronous or high-bandwidth assignments, the less our students with lower bandwidth and technological resources can fully participate. 10. Encourage students to form and participate in study groups to prepare for exams and projects. However, develop a culture of inclusion and equity in all your student collaborations so that they, with each other, can affirm the same types of values of inclusion and equity that you strive to offer them. This can be done in a variety of ways, but it often starts with instructors' statements about diversity, inclusion, and equity in the classroom, and tends to work best when there is collaborative construction of those classroom norms among all the students and instructors. This tends to develop the trust necessary for more open and supportive dialogue so that problems don't arise, or when they do, you can deal with them more effectively. 12. Be proactive and present in resolving inequities and exclusions that students do to each other. This means acknowledging the conflict, affirming students' memberships in the learning community, and supporting students in processes of reconciliation. For more specific cases or methods of reconciliation in class, please feel free to contact me or others at the Center for Teaching. 13. Use anonymous grading. There are options you can select in Brightspace assignments to ensure your students' work is anonymized, and you can learn more here at the link that's provided. Lastly, be collaborative and flexible with your students in assessment, especially online, where an abundance of tools can help you to accommodate a wide diversity of student needs. For Part 4's online tool highlight, we're going to look at discussion boards. Discussion boards allow your full class or small groups to have asynchronous dialogues about a prompt or topic. They can be used formatively or summatively, and they can accommodate most any kind of reflective question. Discussion boards may be particularly helpful as an inclusive form of assessment because they afford greater discussion participation and inclusion of students who have low bandwidth access, limited technology, or those from different time zones who have difficulty accessing virtual classrooms. For more information on this, take a look at the Understanding the Discussion Tool web guide at the link provided. For our faculty spotlights, we have two faculty this time. First, I'll highlight the work of Sophie Bjork-James from Anthropology in her course, The Politics of Reproductive Health. She had a final course project that allowed students to choose their topics and formats and encourage creativity in the adoption of text, video, or audio formats. She incorporates many principles of inclusion and equity into her class, but in this assignment she emphasized personalization and autonomy so students would find greater relevance and culturally appropriate topics to their experiences and interests. She worked to ensure students had increasing autonomy through good scaffolding, student research, topic selection, and final project design. She also made sure that her students incorporated diverse voices into their final projects. For more information on her class, I'll direct you to listen to Derek Bruff's interview with Sophie as a part of the CFT's Leading Lines podcast on educational technology, at the link here in the slide. For Faculty Spotlight number 2, I'd like to highlight the work of Phyllis Shepard, Associate Professor of Religion, Psychology, and Culture at the Divinity School. She takes the idea of student autonomy and engagement one step further. Her course, Pastoral Theology and Care, faced a challenge. Her master's level students often feel they can succeed at pastoral work by virtue of being a caring person, not via the development of ethical, theologically informed practices embedded in the various work of ministry. Therefore, the students often default to trying to demonstrate their already caring disposition or gifts rather than working on the skill and knowledge-building practices of pastoral care. Her solution? She threw away the syllabus and engaged the students in a series of reflective exercises designed to have them co-create the course with her. She began with a process of naming and interrogating power differences among the many stakeholders of the course, herself, TA, the students, but also administrators, future parishioners, and others. This led students to recognize their accountability to the profession and to one another, and it motivated them to embrace the course as a learning community and co-create the course as a process of professionalization. Students created assignments, rubrics, weightings, attendance policies, as well as processes for stating their commitments and resolving discord that may occur. What kind of assessments did they create? They designed theological reflection exercises, community-based learning projects, and case study simulations that function to aid students in their real-world responses to challenges of pastoral care. They also designed weekly post-class assessments to see how the course was going. Phyllis has stated that the critical emergent design process created some initial anxiety and even resistance among students, but that it was worth it, since it opened many more doors for accountable, critically self-reflexive, and collaborative learning. Not only is this an example of radically inclusive assessment processes, but it also is an example of collaborative assessment, the topic to which we will turn in Part 5. For our reflective question, what principles of inclusion and equity do you find most challenging in your assessments, and what might you do to meet them?